All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Voluntaryist Academy. I'm James Cordiner. Go to voluntaristacademy.com. That's the website. More on that later. Tonight, we'll be continuing with the Men Against the State series. It's part of the Anarchism in America and American history kind of series that I'm doing here on the channel. Last week we covered Ezra Heywood and up to his death in 1893. And tonight we're going to be covering William B. Greene, and he is a money reformer. And so we're going to be taking a look at this book, Men Against the State by James J. Martin, the expositors of individualist anarchism in America between the years of 1827 through 1908. We're about halfway done with this series on this book so far, and I'm very excited to continue doing this. I'm going to also want to tell you about this other book that's behind me here by my friend Etienne de Labuissie Squared. It's called To See the Cage is to Leave It, and he just sent me this a little while back, like about a week or so ago. 25 techniques the few use to control the many. I'll be having Etienne de Labuissie Squared on at some point in the future to discuss this new book of his. He also wrote, this is neat. He also wrote this book. It doesn't fit in the book cam very well. I'd have to turn the book cam. But he also wrote this book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History Exposed. How intergenerational organized crime runs the government, media, and academia. And it's a nice little coffee table book, that can really get the conversation started. So I'm going to put this right here for the rest of the broadcast. If you guys want to give this book, his book, To See the Cage is to Leave It, if you want to give that book a chance, there's a link in the show notes where you can go get your very own copy. If you want to get your own PDF copy of Men Against the State, you can do so over at voluntaristacademy.com/resources. I'll show you that later. Tonight I'm wearing one of my new t-shirts. It's the What You Readin' For. It's a callback to a Bill Hicks joke, right? That I'm quite fond of. And, and the punchline is, so I don't become a fucking waffle waitress. Excuse the profanity. I don't usually cuss on the show too often. But if you would like your own shirt about this, stick around to the end and I'll show you where you can go to get a shirt. As my friend Richard Grove would say, and I might be paraphrasing a little bit here, literacy is a form of slavery until a method of critical thinking is implemented or applied in order to discern for oneself truth from falsehood. And that's what we read for here. And so without any further ado, we're going to continue on with our Men Against the State series here. So this is part 2 of the Transition to Philosophical Egoism, part 1. So we're going to be getting through William B. Greene tonight. So William B. Greene, money reformer. The fundamental structure of American anarchism is without doubt based upon the social and economic experiments and writings of Josiah Warren. In one respect, however, his subsequent followers chose to expand the limits of the outline of the free economy. This was in a field in which the New Harmony pioneer had been noticeably inclusive finance. The gradual but increasing complexity of the economy, especially the division of labor occurring in both production and distribution, brought the matter of exchange more forcibly to the attention of the anti-statist radicals. This resulted in one of the few real additions to Warrenite mutualism. The idea of the mutual bank of William B. Greene, an ignored contemporary of Warren's during the period of the experimental towns. Greene, unlike Warren, did not devote a lifetime to unorthodox activities. His life touched the radical movement with intensity only at intervals. and his conversion to full-fledged anarchist belief occupied only the last 10 years of his life, despite an intimate acquaintanceship of a full 3 decades. Furthermore, his early years gave no clue as to the source of any of his later interest in political economy and finance. In a similar manner to Ezra Heywood, it was a sequel to an abortive career in the ministry. Born in Haverhill, Massachusetts, a couple towns over from where I was born, the son of a Boston newspaper publisher, Greene was educated at West Point and acquired there an affinity with military ways that he never repudiated, despite his early defection. He took part in the Seminole campaign in Florida against Osceola as a young officer, and while on active duty professed to have gone through a sudden conversion to religion, now believing war to be quote-unquote unjust. He continued to hold his commission and remain in the fighting area, however, hesitant to expose himself to expected ridicule on announcing his change of heart. He returned north following a serious illness after 18 months of service and entered a theological seminary. Becoming a Unitarian, he now devoted much of his time to the study of Egyptian and Indian history and religion, some of his later writings indicating a competent grasp of Oriental philosophy. After leaving the Harvard Divinity School, where he had become an associate of Thomas Wentworth Higginson, he located in Brookfield, near Worcester, and engaged in the writing of religious tracts and pamphlets. For instances in American history, few instances in American history have created as much curiosity concerning economic and financial matters among amateurs and members of general citizenry as the Panic of 1837 and the drastic credit stringency which characterized it. Banking abuses came under concentrated scrutiny and gave rise to many proposed radical remedies. William Beck's plan for inducing the business world to adopt credit and employ it so as to perform the functions of money by utilizing a complicated system which generalized credit in account was broached in 1839 and was one of the first. Edward Kellogg's Labor and Other Capital, a direct outgrowth of his personal experiences in the panic, had been completed by July of 1843, although it remained unpublished for several years and did not receive much attention until post-Civil War times. Other plans, involving considerable originality and inspired by a fear of potentialities of a money system based on an alliance between large bankers and politicians, sought to impress the independent-minded with the possibilities of solution on a local level, bypassing reforms requiring large-scale adoption. Financial thinking was still dominated by concepts which dated from early 18th century times and concerned the needs of a decentralized economic society. A product of the colonial land bank period, the philosophy centered on a banking system based on private credit. This situation may have been aided by the comparative lack of a commercial class in the vast non-urban areas, the group most interested in central banking policies along European models. The drive for centralized banking on mercantile credit, while well underway by the 1837 panic, was meeting plenty of opposition during the same period, since it hardly coincided with majority opinion well down to the Civil War. Many expert critics, among them Richard Hildreth, William M. Gouge, and George Tucker, had promoted the idea of competition in banking, attacked the national bank, and condemned state-chartered banks in general. Free banking, in the sense in which it was understood during this period, was not synonymous with the uncharted system proposed by early individualist anarchists. Despite many structural similarities and often a similar propaganda, the two financial theories proceeded along separate ways. It can readily be seen, however, that the monetary theories of Greene and Lysander Spooner are deeply indebted to the environment of unrest caused by disturbed relations existing in the money system of the United States of their times. The writings of Greene were to become the best known, although Spooner had previously stated the position of the free money decentralist in Greene's home area with the publication of his constitutional law relative to credit, currency, and banking in Worcester of 1843. Spooner had followed this up with an even more positive work in this line, called Poverty, Its Illegal Causes and Legal Cure, which appeared in Boston 3 years later. It is doubtful whether Greene had any knowledge of these brief treatises when his own expositions of the philosophy of mutualism in banking began to appear for the first time in a series of newspaper articles in the Worcester Palladium in 1849 under the pseudonym Omega. So Greene's pseudonym was Omega, maybe a nom de guerre for its time. Gathered together and expanded with unpublished material, the collection was issued under the title Equality in West Brookfield the same year. This is essentially the same work brought out under the title Mutual Banking the following year, and was destined to become the most widely reprinted of all anarchist financial publications written by a Native American. Small n, Native American. For an understanding of Greene's political, economic, and social ideas, they are best studied together. Okay, so a bank, in Greene's opinion, had only one reason for existing: that of being a place to bring together borrowers and lenders, regardless of what the particular capital available for lending consisted and what was wanted by the borrower. The man without tools and raw material was helpless despite any degree of industry, while the owner of such things faced the prospect of watching them deteriorate in the event that laborers desiring them for productive purposes could not be found. Being what he called, quote-unquote, mutually necessary to each other, their efforts to locate each other was a continual process, which banks could greatly facilitate. The bank, as he saw it, however, was an antisocial institution, carrying on a war with those citizens who did not happen to be a part of it. Free competition among owners of capital he regarded as a healthful thing, depressing the rate of interest and guaranteeing to the worker a greater percentage return of the total of his production. Once a bank in the ordinary sense of the word became organized, this process abruptly ceased. The device thus conceived enabled a number of lenders to escape the consequences of competition, and enabled them to bring, quote-unquote, crushing force upon individuals who did not belong to their number, thus resulting in their possessing the power to control interest rates to their best advantage and prevent the fall of the price of any commodity which they offered to potential lenders. Chartered by legislature, they were now in a perfect position, quote, to enable the few to bring the many under tribute, end quote. And then to follow up, also to, quote, on the side of the bank there is a small army, well equipped, well officered, and well disciplined. On the side of the community, there is a large, undisciplined crowd without arms and without leaders, end quote. And that is from Equality. That's Equality, page 12, written by William B. Greene. I want to point out the use of the word crowd there, okay? Makes me automatically think of Gustave Le Bon's work on the psychology of a crowd. But let's continue with the reading. And while you're at it, you can drop a comment, tell me what you think about banks back then compared to today. Maybe like the video, share it around. Thanks a lot for tuning in. The picture was complete only as far as the particular group of capitalists forming the bank in question was considered. There still existed the possibility of competition from without, with the consequent, much feared drop in the rate of interest. Here, the hand of government, which granted them the monopoly of incorporation, stepped in again to preclude the latter possibility with another special privilege. But to understand this stage, Greene declared it was necessary to review the position of the government in the general matters of the currency and artificially created rates of interest. Greene believed that all trade was barter in one form or another. The adoption of specie by society as a circulating medium merely made the process easier rather than destroyed it. It still remained a valuable commodity, subject to purchase and sale like all others. Greene said, quote, "When we sell anything for money, we buy the money. And when we buy anything with money, we sell the money." So Greene is alluding to the real value is the object, not the money, right? Money is just a medium of exchange. It's not really what's valuable. I see you in the chat there. Army of 12 monkeys. Yeah, that made me chuckle. Thanks a lot for that. With the establishment of specie in the form of gold and silver as the only legal tender by government and the exclusion of all other types of property from furnishing this function, an altogether new element entered into consideration. Exchange remained the same type of process, but the action of the legislature had enhanced the utility of the precious metals in a quote-unquote remarkable manner. The exchangeable value of a particular commodity depended upon not only its utility, but the relative scarcity of it as well. The relative scarcity of gold and silver gave them now a new value not inherent in them as metals, but an artificial one conferred on them by the action of the government, presumably in the interest of society. The result? Greene said that now the metals became a marketable commodity as a medium of exchange, and their utility as a means of exchange became abruptly contracted, allowing those who managed to obtain a monopoly of the supply of these metals to similarly control the business of the area using them as the sole legal tender, and thereby secure a premium for their use by all others engaging in commerce. It's very insightful for the time. Greene said, quote, "Hence followed great social and political evils," end quote. One of the major attempts to repair the damage done to the commercial structure was the passage by the government of laws arbitrarily limiting the rate of interest. This did nothing to restore any kind of competition among loaners of capital. However, because of still another government-created factor, the allowing of holders of specie incorporated as banks to issue paper money upon up to twice the face value of the specie. This enabled them to gather twice the rate of interest permitted. There's a typo in the PDF. This enabled them to gather. It's supposed to say gather. Anyways, this enabled them to gather the twice the rate of interest permitted, or to drive all non-banker loaners of capital out by charging 1/2 the interest until the latter ceased competing. Thus, even quote-unquote usury laws were negated by the creation of banks. And usury is fucking evil. The process now went along relatively unhindered. Greene observed, and this is from his book Equity, this is page 13. So I don't really go over all of the footnotes here that you see at the bottom of the page. And if you're familiar with these broadcasts, you'll know that. But if you're not familiar with that, if you'd like to get this PDF, you can go to my website, get your own copy, and have access to all of the footnotes in this book and all the other books that I read on this channel, or comment on this channel. There's a link in the show notes to that right now. Okay, so Greene observed, equity, page 13, now the banks have everything in their hands. They make great issues, and money becomes plenty. All other commodities become dear. Then the capitalists sell what he has to sell, while prices are high. The banks draw in their issues, and the money becomes scarce. All other commodities become cheap. The community becomes distressed for money. Individuals are forced to sell property to raise money, and to sell at a loss on account of the state of the market. Then the capitalist buys what he desires to buy, while everything is cheap. The operation of the banking system is evident. He commented briefly on the impact that banking and credit organization was producing upon production and price levels. The corollary to credit monopoly, he noted, was an accompanying belief that price was determined by the amount of labor that different commodities could command, which he designated, quote, the philosophy of speculation on human misfortune, end quote. Greene also pointed out, quote, considered from this point of view, the price of commodities is regulated not by the labor expended in their production, but by the distress and want of the laboring class, end quote. A vigorous proponent of the labor cost theory of value, as was Warren, he pronounced, there is no device of the political economists so infernal as the one which ranks labor as a commodity, varying in value according to supply and demand. Greene stoutly held that the ratio of the supply of labor to the demand for it was unvarying because every producer has a consumer, quote, to the precise extent of the amount of his products, end quote. And the price of labor ought therefore to be constant. Greene admitted that there was not only a market price for commodities, which he believed to be based on supply and demand, but a quote-unquote natural price as well, which depended on its cost of production. Although these were in a state of continual oscillation due to the credit system, under a proper system they would coincide at all times. The phenomena of want and quote-unquote overproduction were directly attributable to the credit structure. To quote, the quote is, many a tailor has carried his coat to a market where coats were at once voted overproduction, not because there was no real demand for coats, but because there was no money demand for them. Credit, as he saw it in operation, was actually perpetuating feudalism. Money was furnished in individuals and corporations, principally for purposes of speculation, advantageous to the speculators if successful, catastrophic to the community if a failure. Monopoly of trade or insecurity were the alternatives of the existing organization of credit, the daughter of hard money, begotten upon it incestuously by the insufficiency of circulating medium, which results from laws making specie the sole legal tender. Greene's proposition for remedying the cyclical money shortage and the artificial control of the economy vested in the banking fraternity by the government was what he called mutual bank. Any person could become a member of this bank by pledging mortgages to the bank on actual property, upon which he would be issued bills of exchange amounting to 1/2 of the total value of the mortgaged property. No money was to be loaned to persons not members of the particular banking company, all members entering into a voluntary agreement to accept the paper of the bank and all payments at par, when presented by fellow members. The rate of interest at which the money was to be loaned to the members was to be sufficient only to pay the operating expenses of the institution. Greene claimed that 1% would be enough. Other principles of the mutual bank provided for the release of the member from his pledge when his mortgage had been redeemed. and a declaration promising perpetual non-redemption of specie of the bills of the bank. What the Greene proposal amounted to was a mutual agreement on the part of a number of persons to monetize other values than specie to the amount of 1/2 of the declared valuation of a given volume of these other values, preferably real property. However, he once said, quote, anything that may be sold under the hammer may be made a basis for the issue of mutual money, end quote. At the time he originally proposed such a bank, he suggested that the undertaking be postponed until 10,000 persons signified their intentions of starting the organization. This, he thought, would ensure the feeling of security on the part of the members because all might inspect the books and thus observe on what basis all others were having money issued. This would be further strengthened by the psychological effect of 10,000 persons in the vicinity of such a bank, all using the bills in the member stores, hotels, theaters, tailor shops, restaurants, and similar business enterprises in payment for desired goods and services. Currency in sufficient volume to satisfy the need thereof was Greene's objective, which necessitated a complete divorce from the specie idea of redemption. However, he found no fault with having the valuation of the monetized property expressed with the silver dollar as the standard of value in mind, and the measure of value as well. Thus tied to the silver dollar, the mutual bank bills would rise and fall with the value of silver dollars, without fear of depreciation. Based on the dollar as the measure of value, the silver at a designated degree of fineness. That's a hard one to say, huh? Out loud. Fineness. So the silver at a designated degree of fineness and weight as the standard of value. The mutual money was to serve only as an instrument of exchange. Greene considered that such money would escape the evil consequences attending scarcity or excess of supply. It would always be worth its face value in silver dollars. Okay. Like Proudhon, he believed that the element of money which rendered it insecure was the doubt of final redemption in specie, and he proposed to eliminate this by generalizing the bill of exchange. Greene writes, that is to say, in making of it an anonymous title, exchangeable forever and redeemable at sight, but only in merchandise and services. Or, to speak a language more comprehensible to financial adepts, the problem consists in basing bank paper upon products. The mutual bank was a producer's bank, said Greene. Its currency was non-interest bearing. The monetization of commodities other than gold and silver would tend to further depress the rate of interest. This would enable a person with only his labor to offer to easily borrow capital to engage in productive work and thus create capital goods of his own. Individuals would thus join a mutual bank company not in expectation of a dividend, but to facilitate the procurement of money, a lowering rate of interest being substituted for the usual dividend incentive. Greene objected to the comparison of the mutual money with the disreputable, quote-unquote, wildcat money of a decade before on 4 grounds. The wildcat issues not only promised to redeem in specie, but professed to be based on specie which did not exist. By pretending to be gold and silver, they gravely, quote-unquote, deranged the currency. Without specie backing or any other guarantee, the money was principally borrowed by stockholders of these wildcat banks. Mutual money, on the other hand, was not redeemable in specie, but in actual existing commodities of other types. Furthermore, issued against actual values, it was utilized by all who, quote-unquote, insured it, and had no more effect upon the precious metals than upon any other particular materials or commodities. What would be the consequences of decentralized mutual banking upon such a basis as Greene proposed? A frontal attack on the state was his conclusion. Greene writes, mutualism operates by its very nature to render political government founded on arbitrary force superfluous. That is, it operates to the decentralization of the political power and to the transformation of the state by substituting self-government instead of government ab extra. An investigation of American colonial history not only reinforced this conclusion, but resulted in his abandonment of any claims to originality as far as the mutual bank idea was concerned. In actuality, Greene's and Kellogg's financial propositions had venerable antecedents in the history of 18th century Massachusetts, where quote-unquote land banks, remarkably similar to that of Greene, had been proposed in 1714 and again in 1740. The earlier bank had never obtained the sanction of the General Court and died in discussion, while that of 1740 actually operated for a time with admitted success. This latter bank, which received widespread popular support, nevertheless terminated abruptly. It was disallowed by the British Parliament, acting at the request of the governor and others whom Thomas Hutchinson designated as, quote, men of estates and the principal merchants of this province, end quote. Hutchinson, no friend of the venture, labeled its originators, quote, persons in difficult or involved circumstances in trade, or such as were possessed of real estates, but had little or no ready money at command, end quote, and supported primarily by those, quote, generally of low condition among the plebeians and of small estate, end quote. And that's from a book called History, I guess. Find it in the footnotes if you download the PDF. It's note number 117. Anyways, to continue. Oh, wait, we got somebody in the chat. Oh, it's mandatory myocarditis. What's up, mandatory myocarditis? Mando is saying, I was told Trump was going to end the Fed. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. There's a lot of people that would like to buy that bridge you're selling them. All right, so in fact, yeah, mentioning tariffs in the chat and not so. I'm gonna find the time either in between readings of this book or after I'm done reading this book to record Frederick Bastiat's The Law, and he has some really nice things to say about tariffs in that book. Anyways, let's continue with tonight's reading, though. Thank you for being in the chat. What's up? Stick around to the end, because I'd like to talk to the audience about some stuff at the end. But let's continue here, because it's the reading tonight's not going to be very long. Okay, so we heard from Thomas Hutchinson. Okay, so Greene considered it highly significant that Hutchinson admitted the strength of the bank, confessing that, quote, had not Parliament interposed, the province would have been in the utmost confusion, and the authority of government entirely in the land bank company, end quote. It was Greene's interpretation that the principal disturbance created by the bank had been political rather than economic. Greene writes, Governor Hutchinson ought to have explained more in detail the nature of the evils he complains of, and also to have told us why he, a declared enemy of popular institutions, opposed the advocates of the bank so uncompromisingly. The discovery of a colonial precedent neither detracted from Greene's enthusiasm for his project, nor cast any suspicions upon his independent status as an innovator. The financial writings of others, however, he was already familiar, particularly Kellogg and Proudhon. It is highly probable that he learned from both, even though later editions of his work carried sharp criticisms of some of their theories. Favorable quotations of Kellogg in several of his works indicated a thorough reading at one time of Labor and Other Capital. His knowledge of Proudhon appears to have been somewhat less thorough until after a stay in France in the late 1850s, during which time he became personally acquainted with the internationally known French anarchist. It is most inaccurate to speak of Greene simply as a proponent of Proudhonian principles. Phew. Oof. Coming at a time when the labor and consumer groups were experimenting with quote-unquote associated workshops and quote protective union stores, end quote, Greene suggested that the mutual bank be incorporated in the movement, forming what he called quote complementary units of production, consumption, and exchange, the triple formula of practical mutualism, end quote. This program of mutualism he considered best adapted to local community level. In times of economic distress, the mutual money would prove the bulwark against inflationary or deflationary pressures. Okay, he writes, Greene writes, quote, the town cannot fail disastrously, for the real property is always there, rooted in the very ground, end quote. For some time, the campaign ran strongly to obtain a charter from the Massachusetts General Court for the establishment of a mutual bank. Greene, now in Boston, argued the case before the Town and Country Club, of which he was a member, along with such notables as Ralph Waldo Emerson, Theodore Parker, Henry James, the elder W.H. Channing, Octavius B. Frothingham, William D. Ticknor, Charles Sumner, E.R. Hoare, Henry Giles, John Orvis, and George B. Loring. Repeated petitions of the General Court were made in 1850 and 1851, both under his sponsorship and that of groups of inhabitants of Brookfield, Ware, and Warren. In 1857, he restated his financial arguments in a volume titled The Radical Deficiency of the Existing Circulating Medium and the Advantages of a Mutual Currency, under the stimulation of the new panic assailing the nation's economy. Apathy was the principal response. Shortly thereafter, Greene left for France, where he became interested for a time in mathematics, concern over social matters abating until after the war. Greene's equality contained other than his money and banking theories. Some of his sociological ideas, albeit evidencing little logical organization and often contradictory, appeared here and there in its pages. One was his assertion that as an individual, a man received certain rights at creation, but that the right of property was not one of them. What a bum. Anyway, this was a social creation and was not absolute. So Greene writes, and I'll get to it. I'll say it just for the record, but I want to say it after this because I want to. All right. Society gives me proprietorship because it is for its own interests to do so. My right to my watch is not a natural, but a social right. I own it, not because I earned it, but by the free grace and favor of society, end quote. Okay, and now here's the obligatory aside about this assertion here. Greene's assertion that as an individual, a man received certain rights at creation, but the right of property was not one of them. You own your body. Your body is your property. You get your body in the womb At creation, at conception, your body is your property 100% of your life. So you do have property rights just by existing, because you have rights to own your body and to say what happens with it or to it. Otherwise, the rest of this man's theories about banking and all the other property that is going into the mutual bank, all of that is bunk. It's for nothing. It's completely contradictory. And what Martin here, the author of this book, is very aptly pointed out of its contradictory nature. I'm so happy that he did, because if your body, I say that as a rhetorical question because it is your property, because your body is your property, there's that objective statement there, then the product of the labor of your body that you own is also your property. Whether it be a house that you build or a car or whatever, if you receive fiat currency or alternative currency, whatever you buy with that, whatever job you do, whatever trade you perform, if you're an agorist or whatever, that's how property rights work. In case you're new to this, I wanted to make sure that you heard it here and that you heard it correctly. Okay? That's how natural law works. It all starts with property rights. All rights stem from property rights. Okay? That's just how it is. Yes, that's an objective statement. It's an objective truth. You own your body. Like I say at the end of all these podcasts, you own yourself, period. Okay? I cannot see a sentence like that without going on this kind of little rant here, because I don't care what comes next in the book. I have to say it in my own words. Let's continue with the reading, though. Thank you for bearing with me here. Okay, so I own it not because I earned it, but by the free grace and favor of society, end quote. And he wrote that in Equality. And then, okay, so Greene's conception of individualism, however, was religious in nature. Although failing to describe the rights which the individual received from God, he condemned coercion of any kind as a contention against God himself. It was therefore profoundly immoral to make a man dependent upon his neighbors or upon public opinion, which made him, quote, subservient to his accidents instead of supreme over them, end quote. In another respect, he was much less indefinite. So his book Equality contained one of the first of the anarchist arraignments of socialism as a system of societal organization. Socialism, averred Greene, was the only political system in which he could see no quote-unquote good points. All right, so we're back. Greene, he's won me over after... Hold on. In other types, he saw a few privileged groups such as nobles, slaveholders, or usurers who managed to gather some advantages as compared to the volume of evil endured by the mass of the people. But no one appeared to gain under socialism. Greene writes, "In socialism there is but one master, which is the state, but that state is not a living person capable of suffering and happiness. Socialism benefits none but demagogues, and is emphatically the organization of universal misery. Socialism gives us but one class, a class of slaves." Round of applause for William B. Greene, folks. Written at a time when proponents of quote-unquote state socialism had hardly begun to state the theory, Greene's blast presaged the ideological conflict which was to break out in full flower in the anarchist and socialist journals of 35 years later. Greene's career after this, his advocacy of the mutual bank, was as much an account of irreconcilables as that which had previously transpired. Although abhorring government beyond the local level, he joined the Democratic Party. And now he's lost me again. At the Massachusetts Constitutional Convention of 1853, he championed minority representation and women's suffrage. He was also an outspoken abolitionist. Wealthy by inheritance and marriage, he returned from his stay in France at the outbreak of the Civil War and became commander of the 14th Massachusetts Regiment, later resigning after a quarrel with Governor Andrew. Activity in the ranks of the intellectual radicals once more absorbed his interest at the end of the war. He restated most of his social philosophy in a small book titled Sovereignty of the People. At about the time, Haywood's Worcester group began to demonstrate interest in the mutual bank literature. The reprinting of an enlarged edition of Mutual Banking, the formation of the Labor Reform Leagues, and Haywood's publication of the Word all found in Greene a ready supporter and participant. In the latter part of 1872, he became a member of the French section of the Marxian International Working People's Association in Boston. Shortly afterward, he became president of the New England Labor Reform League. This affiliation placed the New England Labor Reform League as a whole under suspicion as a branch of the International. The aims of the former were alleged to be mere reinstatement of those of the quote, the foreign communists, end quote. Although he collaborated with French members in the formulation of an address outlining the principles of the International Working People's Association, which was subsequently read before the New England Labor Reform League at the 1873 convention, it appears that neither he nor the League continued relations. This is born out of Greene's critical writings concerning communism and his first translations of Proudhon's writings. Good for him. Between 1872 and 1876, Haywood and the League made several attempts to obtain a charter for a mutual bank from the Massachusetts General Court, but to no avail. Pretty sure we covered that in more detail last week. Part 5 of this series covered a lot of Ezra Haywood. The earliest of these was buried in the Committee on Banks and Banking, 3 of whose 7 members were bankers themselves. The general treatment received strengthened the convictions of prominent members of the League that legislatures are made up of capitalists who draw pay for serving their own interests, not the people's. End quote. Greene participated in general criticism of the legislature, but gave no evidence of entertaining hope that opposition might be overcome. Oh, so Greene, all right, so this is from footnote 135 concerning Greene's critical writings concerning the communism and the first translations of Proudhon's writing. So Greene was translating Proudhon's What is Property? And so Greene's translations began appearing in The Word, which was a publication in January of 1874, at which time he declared, "You will perceive that Proudhon and our friend Josiah Warren smite on substantially the same of anvil." Warren abruptly repudiated the comparison. The Word, Volume 2, January of 1874. So, yeah, if you want to read the rest of that footnote. So, anyways, yeah, it's interesting. Greene was translating Proudhon's writings. He was like the one doing it in America. Okay, so Greene returned to Europe in the spring of 1878. His premature death in Weston, England, during the same year brought to an end the career of the ablest native, small n, American anarchist, writer and theorist on finance. Mutual banking remained prominent in the individualist propaganda thereafter without additions or abridgment. It was widely read by those interested in radical currency and has been reprinted repeatedly up to the present day. The contributions of Ezra Heywood and William B. Greene to native anarchist thought are important not only in themselves but also in their impact upon contemporaries and later converts. Ineffectual upon the radical movement as a whole due to their unconcern with class consciousness, they were regarded as mere examples of the petty bourgeois response to the grave and growing economic disarrangements of their time. Their importance in the transition period between the experimental colonies and the strictly intellectual propaganda of anti-statism cannot be ignored. For by 1890, their efforts had become recognized among radicals everywhere as a contribution to revolutionary social philosophy. Greene's currency ideas gradually became those which the latter-day anarchists supported, even though they represented a change from those originally developed by Warren. The labor-for-labor ideas embodied in the labor check system, found in the writings of both Warren and Andrews, dropped from the discussions of the problem of exchange. Mutual banking and currency based on a commodity standard of value, but allowing for the monetization of all durable wealth, now became the core of anti-statist finance. In like manner, Warren's approach to the land problem was modified by the inclusion of more studied and abstract thinking by less radical exponents of reform. Okay, so next week we're going to get into chapter 6, which is Heralds of the Transition to Philosophical Egoism, part 2. Okay? And we'll continue on with getting to know J.K. Engels. And he was a land reformer. All right. So, what were we going to do next? I want people to take a look at voluntaristacademy.com. If you go over to voluntaristacademy.com, you can sign up for the newsletter. You can become a sponsor of the show, okay? And by becoming a sponsor of the show, you get access to a Discord server, and you can attend the bi-weekly town hall that I'm trying to start up, where a private discussion between myself and the members can take place. A discussion based on the material that's discussed that I present on the channel. And we can even, we can, of course, talk about other things pertaining to the topic of voluntarism, anarchism, or just whatever's on your mind. Okay? And then even, I'm thinking about upping the ante on the offer and maybe throwing together some sort of maybe, game time where we can, I don't know. I'm thinking about maybe, I know it sounds silly, but I thought earlier today, wouldn't it be cool if we had like a Minecraft server or something like that, where we could, if people are into that sort of thing. I like to play Minecraft every now and then because I'm a big baby. So you can come over to voluntaristacademy.com and find all this stuff. Voluntarism leads to real freedom. All other political philosophies allow a ruling class to engage in violence and coercion against the majority. Us voluntarists reject the artificially indoctrinated belief system of statism in favor of true freedom through the voluntary interactions between free people. Okay, voluntarism is the most moral and principled of all political systems, if you can even call it one. It recognizes natural law versus frequently immoral and illogical government law, which we can call political scribbles. Voluntarism honors the non-aggression principle. The goal here at Voluntarist Academy is to teach all things regarding the onlyism that is fair for everyone. While you are here, you can find all the resources necessary to understand this philosophy of consent. So, speaking of that, you come over to the resources page. And on the resources page, we can find all the PDFs, or even some that I haven't gone over yet. And you can find your very own copy of this one here, or you can find it, you know, you can get it in the link in the show notes right now. You can contact me with a small message. voluntaristacademy.com/contact. And if you don't really want to become a member, you know, like a monthly, if you don't want to really become a sponsor, if you don't want to become a sponsor of the show, you can just come over to the donate page, voluntaristacademy.com/donate. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ways that you can donate. Cryptocurrencies such as Dash, Monero, Ethereum, Bitcoin. You can donate to my PayPal. You can go to Buy Me a Coffee. Easy to scan these QR codes. If you like to help support this show to see it keep going and growing, this is a way to do that. But the best way to do that is, you can hit the like button. You can subscribe. You can subscribe to the channel. You can do all that too. And I very greatly appreciate it. So let's go back to the home page. Oh yeah, I told you guys. Okay. And oh yeah, you can buy a t-shirt too. Links to all this is in the show notes. The shirt that I'm wearing right now is for sale. What you reading for? Okay. It comes in all sorts of sizes. It comes in a few different colors, including white. White and black are for sure 100% cotton. And it's really nice. It feels really nice. And it moves well with my body. Doesn't really bunch up too badly. And you can also get some hoodies as well. You want to get a shirt with just the Voluntarist Academy logo with the URL on the front of it. I have those, all sorts of different colors and variations of those here. You can help support the show with the purchase of a t-shirt, and you can get your own t-shirt. You can also go to getautonomy.info. Let's see. And you can learn about whether or not Richard Grove's course of action is correct and right for you. Okay, there's a link in the show notes to that, and it's an affiliate link, so that's another way that you could help support my operations here, and you can get a whole lot out of it for yourself. Okay, so you can schedule a call. Tell them James Cordiner sent you. And you can be a part of a thriving community of like-minded people who want to maybe exit and build, or want to learn more about how they can contribute to the world, fill in the blanks that the public school system intentionally left blank in our minds. Okay. I'd like to thank Brendan Daniel for his contribution to the show. He is the music artist. He contributes the music to this channel. The little guitar riff that you hear at the beginning and end of these broadcasts is Brendan Daniel. He's a really, really great folk artist. I suggest you go over to his Instagram page and check him out, and send some love and support his way by listening to his music, and tell him I sent you. He came up to the house one day last year and recorded some music right here in the studio. And I promised him that I would tell people about his work if I could use it on the channel. So, Men Against the State, we're going to come back next week, and we're going to continue reading it. Oh, one last thing. Well, a couple other things. Go to the One Great Work Network. That's onegreatworknetwork.com. And check out all the content creators over there. I've been a content creator on the One Great Work Network for about 3 years now. And very proud and honored to be over there with all those great people. Thank you, Mark Passio, for onboarding me all that time ago. And speaking of onboarding, I've been in talks with the producer of the P.A.Z.NIA radio network, and you'll be able to find replays of the show over there. And one day I might even start producing shows for just that radio network. Who knows what the future holds. But there's links to the show notes. There's links in the show notes to all of these offers, all of these things. And I'd like to personally thank each and every person who tuned in and has been listening to this. Thank you, my mandatory myocarditis. Thank you, Army of 12 Monkeys. I really, really love it when I see some comments in the chat. It really makes it a lot more fun. So anyone that's watching the replay on this, drop a comment, tell me what you think, and we can get a discussion going, or join the community and we can discuss it even further. Thank you again. Remember on your way out that taxation is slavery, and you own yourself. At the end of the day, you own yourself. It is your natural law right to claim ownership over your body, and that is an objective truth. And there are many more objective truths that we know for certain, or else how could I sit here and call it objective? And there's many more to discover. I love you guys, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.